Omar Ladonai Masli Umaturati Elohai Aptapo Kihu Yatzicha Mifak Yakush Mi Dever Havot Ve'evrato Yasech Lach V'tachat Nafav Techseh Zina v'sochei ra'amito Lo tira mipachad laila Mechet ya'uf yomam Midever ba'ofel yahaloch Mi katav yoshuv tzoraim Yipol mimitzirkai lefurava Miminecha elecha lo yigash Ra'al peinecha tavit V'shilumav trishayim tirak yata Adonai mosi elyon sam tamilnecha Lo tunei lecha ra'a V'nega lo yikra v'ohalecha Yikraini v'eineu imo anochi b'tzara Achatzehu ve'achabadeihu orech yamim ma'aspiehu ve'areu mishuati orech yamim ma'aspiehu ve'areu mishuati Al mekomo yavo b'shalom Me'ishayahu Ilya ben Aryeh Mordechai v'Malka go unto God in peace, and we can all say, Amen. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach, V'hu Rachum Yechaper Avon v'lo Yashchit, V'yirba la'ashiv apo v'lo ya'ir kol chamato. God is given, God is taken away. May the name of the Lord be blessed. We can all say, Amen. Ve'ashov ha'afar al ha'aretz ksheya, v'ruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher netana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. May Chuck's soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Send comfort, God, to those who mourn. Grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow. And we can all say, Amen. The Jewish burial service is a collection of psalms and recitations that when we put them all together, we connect Chuck's life to thousands and thousands of years of the people of Zion. And so with that, I'm going to begin with, as we often do, as we usually do, with the words of the psalmist David, in Hebrew, Mizmor LeDavid. I'm going to chant it in the traditional Hebrew and then translate into the English, and by about the middle, you'll understand that this is universal for all people in all the nations in mourning. Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai roi lo echsar binateshe ya Rabbi tzayni al menuchot yanaleini nafshi shovev yanechaini v'magdei tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech b'geitz al mavet lo yiradak yatayim adi shivtecha ומשענתך המה ינחמוני תערוך לפניי שולחן נגד צורריי דשנת בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית אדוני Leorech Yamim. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. And if you'd like to that you can say amen. In a few moments, Chuck's family, members of his family, will share in the sacred task of eulogizing their father, their Zeta. And I want to frame their words right from my heart, with a little bit of words of tradition. I mean, you don't really need my help. But my intention, my kavanah that I bring to this is I'd like to honor Chuck, from the young kid who was schlepped onto the bima by 3 senior rabbis in this community, who was welcomed with open arms by Chuck, a traditionalist and one of the longest standing members of the congregation. I quickly became his cantor, and he my very, very good friend. I find, but today I find that one of the aspects of practicing religion that has the most impact is in the comfort provided by familiarity. As Jews, we rely on ritual acts on repeat to bring us back, return us to remembering that we should not take for granted what we eat, what we say, the day of the week, the time of the year. These are things we say and do around symbolic items. Challah, wine, candles. These are just objects, really, connected to ancient words we string together methodically. And then sometimes we are blessed, and I feel the most powerful way, once in a blue moon, with people who affect and impact on everyone around them just by their human presence. Like Chuck and Lil. For Chuck, a phenomenon so unique in that he didn't need to say a word, he just needed to be. He was both a grounding presence, and an uplifting one, because in my opinion, he was a shining example of how a person could model integrity and humility. A kind person, even when he didn't know anybody was looking. In Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, verse 15, we learn from Shammai Omer, Aseh Toratcha Keva Emor Me'at Ve'aseh Harbe. That's the big example. Vehevi Mekabel Et Kol Ha'adam B'Sefer Panim Yafot. So Shema used to say, make your study of Torah a fixed practice, speak little but do much, and receive people with a pleasant countenance. For 22 years, as I have looked out onto the congregation at Eitz Chaim, there were always two people who were top among the few important fixtures in our sanctuary, and therefore pillars of our congregation and our community. The familiarity and the dependability and the good feeling that came from Chuck and Lil. By their arrival, Shabbat services were as they should be. Just a little past the start of the service, Max Hockman of blessed memory saved your spots with his tallis bag always. He was doing what we all wanted to do, making sure your place was there, because that's what made it right for all of us. Our tradition teaches us also that say little and do much characterizes good virtue and integrity. Virtuous in act rather than in talk. People who are interested in publicizing what they do rather than doing it for the good of doing it. Maybe they're really doing it for affirmation or honor or the recognition of others. As many of you know, and I'm sure you'll hear many more stories about 10 Delia, the backdrop of 62 some odd years for the Frohlich family, and really everyone around them and knew them, for family and friends. An open door, everyone could come, everyone could be, no invitation needed, just come. As Lil describes, one day a neighborhood boy came to the door. Oh, it was a girl. Oh, even better. A neighborhood girl came to the door and asked Lil if her kids were home, because she wanted to play. And when she explained that they weren't, she said, and what about the tata? Would he come out to play with me? And while we never quite got to the end of that story, we had a lot to talk about. I'm sure you all, knowing Chuck, understand that the ending was he was right out. Like he was often with his own kids. Like that little girl must have seen time and time again. But not by any means the reason Chuck did it in the first place. And while he is one of the very few 95-year-olds that I know that has a Facebook account, he never did anything for the photo op. At Jonah and Adam's wedding just a few months ago, oh, well, it feels like months. Okay, years ago. Boy, are you going to correct me through the whole thing, Frohlich family? Okay, it was a few years ago. My hair is more gray. I had my final moment, really, with Chuck face-to-face, because that was during the pandemic. And I was able to fasten his boutonniere on him. He was quietly struggling with it right before the chuppah, but of course he didn't ask anybody for help. I noticed that he was struggling. So he had a captive audience in that moment with me. And he could have spent the time boasting about all that I knew he was very proud of. His children, his grandchildren, the moment he was about to experience. Instead, he talked about how thankful he was for reaching this moment with everyone. And of course, he wanted to know how I was doing. Father to Jack and Karen and Arnie and Janet and Perla and Ron, Zeta to Meital, Elisheva, Leora and Roni, and Jonah and Adam and Bryn and Max, Ariel and Lisi, Carney and Renee and Noah, and great Zeta to Maya. He was a good sport when the kids were little. He was the first in line. Perhaps he was the only one willing to play dress up, or more accurately, be dressed up and endure having his hair done. He never missed a family event, from dance recitals to soccer to traveling to Israel at least 9 times, to Toronto, every visit planned around a milestone that would never be missed. And he didn't miss much, especially a rule that was to be followed. A federal government employee in the Customs Department, you can imagine the serious situation he was in when he was in the car full of kids with their unfinished oranges as they were about to cross the Canada-US border. I mean, imagine the stress. As some of you may know, citrus, not a commonly flagged issue in our day-to-day lives, is the forbidden fruit of the border crossing. So there was Chuck pulling over, adamant that everybody finish their fruit so as not to endure the possibility of being accused of possession. Along with honesty came Yiddishkeit and tradition, staples in his life. He was ready for every Shabbos these days, right with his talis and his kippah, right by his computer, ready to sign in, the first, second, or third to sign in. Chuck and Lil participated in all the community activities from Mamaloshin to Music and Mavens, Gwen Sector, Daily Minyan, and everything, any learning opportunity that happened around the community or certainly at Congregation Eitz Chaim. And most of all, everything to do with family. Theirs beginning with a first date on a skating rink, Chuck holding up Lil as she described her ankles banging together. Perhaps she knew right then the man she had before her, supportive, grounding, and good-natured, so much so she gathered the chutzpah, which was especially something in those days, and she asked him to a dance. And as she said, he was a terrible dancer, but a great guy. And there it began. And you mentioned he was good-looking. You got that in. A few times during our meeting, Lil described Chuck as very practical. Learning a little bit about his earlier life, I will share about his upbringing. This makes sense to me. One of 10 children, born September 13, 1927 in Hoffer, Saskatchewan, to Max Frohlich and Molly Glassman. His parents, immigrants from Austria and Romania. It was the Jewish Immigrant Aid Services who brought them here, gave them a piece of land to work the farm, and it was kind of like, figure it out. Figure it out. Study it and figure it out. And that is exactly what Chuck did. He did his best to thrive. And from those early days when transportation to school was, by horse and buggy, he experienced two things I want to highlight. Probably two things he didn't speak much of. One, when he was a kid, he was sent home from school because he only had rubber boots. And he didn't want to speak up and say he didn't have any other shoes. And two, he watched his very learned father, witnessed him be the one to take on the responsibility of making sure everyone in that colony, all the Jews who were very poor and struggling, had enough matzah for Pesach. Likely, there were many more things which impacted his life. However, if you just think of those two things as small glimmers into a man who never shared too much, you might realize that as Chuck leaves this world on the 6th of Tishrei, Shabbat Shuvah, during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, obviously, the time of year marked by Tshuva, really meaning returning to oneself, you might be inspired by the idea that Chuck, throughout his life, never left who he really was. His inner self, his core beliefs, never wavered. That was always how he remained, fully knowing what was important to him, the well-being of his family, the shalom bayit of his family, the strength of his community, both here and in Eretz Yisrael. He knew. He didn't need to tell everybody all the time, but somehow we all knew. May you, Lil, and your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, nieces and nephews, and all who knew him, be inspired by this man who lived a life of tshuva. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he forever rest in peace, and we can all say Amen. So now members of Chuck's family can come forward in whatever order you would like. I don't think you need any introduction. Try not to adjust the mic. I will for you.
I feel that the Canada geese are giving my dad a send-off, and I just love to see them and hear them, and I thank them. My dad did not like the color black. I'm sorry for all of you who are wearing black, but my mom and I took that to heart today. Dad loved puzzles, Sudoku, word games, jumble. To the Wordle fans, if you didn't do the Joodle today, here's a spoiler. Today's answer is Tati. Tattie. Tati, Tate, Daddy. Adonai noten v'Adonai lokech. God gives and God takes away. Well, our quiet, dignified, shy, just, careful dad and Zeta Chuck spent his life only giving. He gave his all as a young man while working on the family farm in Saskatchewan during the Depression on land that was not arable. Orphaned as a young man with 3 young sisters to look after, he gave up on higher learning and a future as an accountant to provide for the sisters in the big city of Winnipeg. Gifted in his mathematical abilities, this city missed out on a great numbers guy. He gave his expertise as a handyman, a Mr. Fix-It. Between my brothers and I, there were 5 homes that he would help look after with electricals, painting, plumbing. We always prepared a dad's list full of jobs to do before each visit. We've saved a lot of money by having him do all this work for us. While working full-time for the government, he would fix people's electrical appliances such as record players, toasters, TVs. We all remember his big silver box of tubes. He gave of his body, literally. He gave blood for years. He gave of his time. Once he retired, he volunteered for the Jewish Child and Family Services, driving people to their appointments for 15 years and was honored for this mitzvah. And he was a great, careful driver. We don't recall a single parking ticket or speeding ticket ever. That would have been a great waste of money. He quietly gave to charities. It was hard for him to say no to someone in need. In his desk, Mom, I was peeking, I'm sorry. There is a list of charities he donated to in 2021 and 2022. Each year is meticulously documented with the date, the organization, the method of payment, the amount, and if the receipt was received. Everybody in this city and beyond benefited from his donations to organizations such as Camp Masad, Fidel Association for Ethiopian Jews, Jews for Judaism, Shalom Residence, Na'amat, Emunah, Eitz Chaim, Simon Wiesenthal, Magen David Adom, Chabad, Jewish Federation, B'nai B'rith, Beit HaLochem, Jewish Child and Family, Simkin Center, Heart and Stroke, CNIB, Health Science Center, St. Boniface Center, Cancer Care, Siloam, Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. That was a bit of a surprise. Seven Oaks Hospital, Friends of Manitoba Museum, Gwen Sector. Who knows the number of people who were touched and helped and reached by his giving? He gave to the State of Israel. From my parents' first visit in 1985, which then went to include visits for 1 wedding, 4 births, and 4 bat mitzvahs. He gave his love to his wife of almost 66 years, our mom Lil. He gave his love to his kids and our partners. He gave his love to his 9 grandchildren and his 1 great-granddaughter. He gave his love to his nieces and nephews. He gave his love to his friends, his shul, his coffee and lunch club buddies. The following blessing describes our dad and Zeta perfectly, which we say on Friday nights in our home. Blessed is a man who reveres Adonai. He greatly delights in God's commandments. His descendants will be honored in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. His household prospers and his riches endure forever. Light shines in the darkness for the upright, for the one who is gracious, compassionate, and just. He is not afraid of evil tidings. His mind is firm, trusting in Adonai. His heart is steady. He will not be afraid. He gives freely to the poor. His riches endure forever. His life is exalted in honor.
Those were wonderful words. I apologize in advance for the length of my speech, but when you live to be 95, you have a lot of stories in your life to be told. It is hard to say goodbye, and even though I had my dad in my life for 62 years, I very selfishly wanted more time with him, and at the same time appreciating how many great years that we had together. My mom and dad were living in their apartment at the Bolton independently, and on September the 6th, my dad, still driving, went to Superstore. He wanted to check the price on something. They came back, and an hour later he had a stroke, and he was taken to Health Science Center. He received timely, compassionate, and outstanding care, and he wasn't denied any investigation. And at first we were a little bit optimistic, but unfortunately the effects of his stroke and his underlying medical conditions were just too much for his body to recover from. And he died peacefully and comfortably, and he was surrounded by the love of his family at the time of his passing, which was September 30th at 11:45 p.m. My dad did have the good fortune to have a large extended family of 10 Frohlich siblings. He was the last to pass, and so sadly he had to say goodbye to 9 siblings, and I'll just want to honor them by giving their names. His siblings were Rebecca, Marion, Clara, Sam, Mandel, Sophie, Susie, Esther, and Sylvia. So in addition to our immediate family, he had 18 nieces and nephews, and many more great nieces and nephews, and he had an impact on many of them. And I will later on just read a few of the emails that I got. People, if you knew my dad, you knew he was a man of very few words. Some people would say a man of no words. That's a joke. I think that sometimes he always listened, but my mom had said it all, and he just felt that there was nothing more for him to say. When he spoke, you listened, and even though he didn't always engage you in a conversation, if you took the time to engage him, he'd be more than happy to talk to you about just many, many topics. He was the true definition of a mensch, and he was a very, very gentle man. One thing he didn't want to talk about was his childhood on the farm and the hardships that he and his family faced growing up. Many families did. I'm sure that shaped his worldview and his frugality. He was an avid watcher of the news. We had many conversations about politics and world events and issues pertaining to Israel and the Jewish world. And I would say we didn't always agree, although that's not true. We never agreed. But we did respectfully listen to each other and could have a conversation about our different views. When Mom and Dad moved to the Bolton from their house last year, we got them a nice big TV to enjoy, and I just told them he had to give Mom a break from Fox News. The move to the Bolton came at the right time for him. He couldn't at 94 maintain the house. It was socially isolating during COVID to not be able to go out to all the programs that were talked about, and even just to go to his shul every day for minions. And I think that was very hard for him. And I think it was also hard for him to leave the house, because I think that was him giving up some of his independence and even to get rid of some of his old tools, which, according to him, still had a lot of value. And Um, as Tracy mentioned, he was a career civil servant with the federal government, and he retired early. He managed the Monash Manor apartment block, and then after that, he did many years of volunteer work. He did try to teach me many sort of mechanical and technical things over the years. I'm sorry, Dad, that I was a poor student, and he finally realized that if it wasn't part of the human body, that it was all that knowledge was wasted on me. I did remember watching him in the basement working, and many people won't remember because why would you? Televisions used to have these old vacuum ray tubes, and he had the knowledge how to fix them. And he had a small business where he would go and fix TVs. And I remember looking at these tubes and these diagrams of very complicated electrical currents. And to me, it was just like a different world. I could not make sense of that. And I was just so impressed that that's something he could actually make sense from. And as we talked about, he was a handyman, which I'm sure was of necessity. My dad was athletic, and he passed those genes down to us. Not those old jeans in the old yellow dresser that finally left Tendalia last year, but athletic genes. He was a good baseball player, and in the country, I guess in his teens, he was the pitcher, and he had this peculiar style of delivering the ball underhand with this wicked spin that I'm sure was hard to hit, and it was really hard to catch. So we spent many hours on the front yard at Tendalia playing catch. I don't know how he could catch because he brought from the country, they called it a glove, but it was almost like a flat leather pancake that had no pocket, and I don't know how he caught the ball. But we finally thought, well, we're going to get him a nice new glove, but knowing Dad, he left the glove. He didn't use it because his old glove was good enough for him. He played baseball at the Kildona Park in the Seniors League till well into his 80s. And I even had a patient ask me, I can't tell you his name obviously, hey, are you related to the Charlie Frohlich who played baseball? And I said, well, yeah, it was my dad. And he said, man, he was a good hitter. He also bowled and he curled. Yes, he said curling was a sport, so I believed him. He was, and then in the later years, he was part of a group that used to mall walk at Garden City Shopping Center. They'd go every day, walk the mall. Sadly, in the last few years, his exercise tolerance was decreasing. It just wasn't comfortable for him, and then during COVID, that stopped. He was a sports fan, and he watched all the Jets and Bomber games, and I always looked forward to having sort of post-game conversations with him. I did change his mind on something. I think when he came here, he was a Saskatchewan Rough Rider fan, because people from Saskatchewan, they apparently bleed green. But I converted him to a Bomber fan, at least when they were playing the Riders. My dad did keep up with technology. I think he had a personal computer before we did, although it's because Ron gave him one. But, he was on Facebook, he surfed the net, and as our email addresses were similar, we would sometimes get his emails by mistake. It's okay, nothing personal, just the occasional conspiracy theory. My dad was an environmentalist years before it was mainstream and before science had told us that this was the right thing. But how could he not? Growing up on the farm and depending on the land for food. They had a windmill on the farm to power the water pump, and now we're building massive wind turbines to generate electricity. He practiced energy efficiency his whole life. He would unscrew light bulbs in the rec room if there were areas that he didn't think need to be lit. When he taught us to drive, he told us to take your foot off the gas to coast, which now we're told to do, but when you did it like 3 blocks before a red light, that was a stop sign that made other drivers a little bit angry. Even though he left the country in his 20s, he always kept an appreciation for the land. And in fact, the land that his family were given was eventually purchased by my cousin, and they farmed the land. And my dad always, every year, would want to know how the crops were doing. I remember many road trips going out west. We would always go into family functions, and my dad loved to point out the different crops. And so a year or two ago, we were driving out to our cottage, and I pointed out a yellow crop to him, and I said, "Canola, Dad, canola," because he thought I would say mustard. Tracy talked about my parents' life together. She talked about how they met at Renfrew Apartments when he went to visit a friend. He did leave the farm to come to Winnipeg, and as discussed, to be with his sisters. She did tell the story about the ice skating, and I know when you told us that story, we thought that, or Joan and Bryn thought that maybe that was a little good flirting on your that maybe you could really skate and didn't need him to hold you up. My parents were married January the 8th, 1956, and they had 66 years of life together. He was her rock, and they bought their house at Tandalia in 1959 and lived there till we moved them to the Bolton last year. And as people know here, Tandalia was always open for a visit or for many functions. They had a very busy and good social life, regular attendees at all the Jewish film festivals, concerts, speakers, Gwen Sector, and of course their shul. My dad was a devoted and loving partner and father. Even though finances were tight, it was important to him and Mom that we all were sent to Parrott School to receive a Jewish education. He was very dedicated to his immediate and extended family and friends. He showed us in his actions how important family is. We never missed a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, or wedding, and we fondly recall many trips to Edmonton, Calgary, St. Paul in a 1971 Plymouth Valiant with no air conditioning, driving across the country. And that's why we're so close with many of our cousins, my dad's nieces and nephews, who he deeply impacted. And I'm just going to read a few. I got many emails. Despite the hardships that the Frohlich children clearly endured, there was a love and a bond that connected each of them and has always weaved its way into many of their descendants. Our full family has now experienced a great loss. A kind soul and the last of the Frohlich siblings, one of the bearers of the Frohlich legacy we were fortunate to inherit. How truly blessed we all were to have had Uncle Chuck in our lives. His love was genuine and his smile was always warm and sincere. Not the most boisterous of the Frohlich siblings, but you always knew you were loved with Uncle Chuck. When you asked him how he was, he would always say, fair to middlin'. But we knew he was always so much more than that. And then you'll soon hear Jonah and Noah will come up and tell you the impact on him as their Zeta. Living in Winnipeg gave my family the privilege of spending many hours of quality time together, birthdays, anniversaries, Shabbat dinners, recitals, grads, or just visiting, and we're going to miss that. So, Dad, to conclude, I may have been a poor student at learning how to be a handyman, but I hope I was a better student at following your examples and teaching on how to live a life with honesty, humility, hard work, Yiddishkeit, and a love for family and friends. Your memory will be a blessing, and I and my family love you, and we will miss you.
I apologize if it's a little bit long here. I hope anyone who needs to sit down can. But we have a lot to say about our dad. I'm sure that he wouldn't approve of this, so that we would be keeping you here. But thank you. and to see everyone is very heartwarming. Dad, you never sat me down to tell me how to live my life. You never tried to show me how to be humble. You never told me that I should support my family. You never instructed me about doing good unassumingly. You never lectured me about not causing anybody harm. You didn't advise me to be honest and real. You never suggested that I volunteer and do acts of kindness. You never told me that it's good to live a life without ever suing or being sued. No, Dad, you were too humble to even think that you had wisdom to impart. But you were a living example of all of the above and so much more. Yes, you taught by example the true way of instructing, and I'm not implying that I have these qualities. I remember you using the term derech eretz. You said it as one word, it's derech eretz. You got that from home, literally meaning the way of the land, but commonly held as implying ethical and upright behavior. It's clear that you heard that in your household as part of your education. Our sages say, "Kol haboreach min hakavod, hakavod rodef acharav." That one person who does not seek honor or respect will be pursued by it. He'll eventually get that. There are people who spend their whole lives pursuing kavod. There are those who don't pursue but bask in it. This isn't a moral observation. These people can be good, kind, they contribute to community. I'm just describing, right, what my dad was. I don't want to put him on a pedestal. He wouldn't want that. You simply did not live in a world where honor was part of your interpersonal ecosystem. You weren't a macher, someone who sought the spotlight. Very much the opposite. You were just you, and that was a lot. I remember accompanying you on your calls as you dabbled as an electronics repairman. Things that were said, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I remember when he was out doing these calls, it was usually friends and family. No, Chuck, it can't be that much. It must be much more. Even your time, meaning they're always saying, you're charging way too little. I was 5 or 6 at the time. I remember hearing the squabbles. You never asked for much, Dad. That's an example. Not from those customers, not from Mom, Perla, Arnie, and I. Of course, I don't know that you asked from the Almighty. I don't know what you asked from the Almighty. You left that side very much concealed, as most of us do. You just appreciated having us as your loving family and lived a life with what we call mistapek b'muat, to be content with what you need and not a frivolous life. You provided for those around you according to their needs, but for yourself you were frugal. It's funny, I don't remember you getting upset with anyone or showing any anger, except for one night in the middle of a cold 1970s winter when our house was pelted with eggs or tomatoes. They freeze on the windows, the big windows. You ran out of the house trying to chase down the riffraff. I remember running out of the house after you, being more surprised by your action and with concern for you. Well, if you catch them, what's going to be? They were long gone, but I saw then that this mild-mannered countenance, you were going to protect your family. I know I wasn't always easy to manage, like when you came home with that 71 Valiant that Arnie mentioned. Instead of the 73 Impala, I took a tantrum, right? We learned to live with the car and even got dates, so we learned another lesson. Just like Mom didn't marry for the car you were driving, we'd have to find dates, friends who appreciate us for who we are and not what we have. It was always fun playing catch with the baseball, etc., and you heard about the glove. I remember noticing how happy you were during visits from or to family, especially with the early Saskatchewan siblings rise. Your siblings, you get up early, we'd see you sharing a coffee with them, maybe a shtickle of chalva, which you all liked, and more than a few chuckles. We pieced together the history, and it's clear that homesteading with 10 kids during a depression took its toll. We heard about that. There's no doubt your child wasn't a bowl of cherries, it was more like rhubarb. Despite that, though, you remained close to your siblings and with a feeling of nostalgia towards Saskatchewan, but more than that, someone who underwent bitter experiences of hard times, and it's clear there were, and lost a father at the age of 18, could jade one's personality. Usually does. In your case, though, Dad, you remained good-natured, kind-hearted, humble, and giving, and we never saw you carrying pent-up frustrations or anger. Since I made Aliyah, we had the great pleasure of hosting you and Mom in Israel. As the years went by, we enjoyed many visits to Winnipeg, the product of your largesse, always showing us a good time, including spending time at Winnipeg Beach together. In the last 10 years, the goodbyes became more emotional, accompanied by that doubt of if I will see you again. You knew that what I was thinking, and you always had a tear to match mine before leaving. When I became more committed to practicing Judaism, not only were you uncritical, you were accepting. In the years that you would come to the shul I davened at. Walking to shul and sitting with you was a source of great nachas. In recent years, when that became difficult, I enjoyed visiting with you and Mom at the shul that became your kehila and home, Eitz Chaim. We shared so many Shabbat meals together, and you're probably the number one fan of my chulent. Though when I heard that you and Mom began freezing the leftovers, I had to rethink it. Although hardships on the farm blurred many fond memories, it was clear that Judaism was a major part of the home you grew up in, and you embraced it in your way. I remember one Shabbat morning at the beach when we walked together to the beach shul that was moved to Camp Masad. It was a long walk, and we shared many memories, and you were speaking much about your childhood, some sweet, some sour. The small minyan that was taking place there was lacking a Bal Koreh, someone to read the Parsha. So they turned to me. And even though I did a hack job, you were beaming with pride. Karen, Meital, Chevy, Lior, and Ronnie loved you so much. The Friday Skypes were part of our Shabbat preparations. Having a good schmooze with you and Baba to overhear the girls speaking at length to the two of you in English was a great pleasure. And you seemed to sometimes get more information from them than Karen and I, probably most of the time. Mom was already keeping the tradition going. They all knew how special you are as they matured and understood how the qualities that you held, Dad, were rare and truly special. They were so proud that you were their Zeta. It was a special blessing that Lior and Ronnie spent quality time this summer getting to know you better. Before the stroke, we were planning what we're going to do during my visit. You suggested that I'll take you to the GC shopping center one morning to have a coffee with your chevra. You weren't the biggest schmoozer, but you loved being in the company of friends and family. Our sages teach in the tractate Rosh Hashanah that the founding fathers of our nation and likely foremothers were born and died in the month of Tishrei. Tishrei is a special month. It's the first one. It's the seventh, but it's also the first because of Rosh Hashanah. So all the people who had a major impact on us, born and died. It's a pretty, rash statement. There were obviously many people who influenced us in great ways that weren't born in Tishrei, but Dad, yes, you were born and left this world in the month of Tishrei as well. And you were our founding father and an example to so many, especially to me. I miss you already. May your soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Ti nishmatcha tzura b'tzura chaim. Yizercha baruch.
Take the wide stance here. It's okay. It's fine.
No, that's ridiculous.
I'm ridiculous. I'm grateful to hear all these other versions of this man. This is my Zeta. That's the only way that I got to see them. They were like a gentle, caring presence, and they'd microwave you an egg at the drop of a hat. That was the version that I had the privilege of getting. Someone who was always open and with endless patience. I never knew them as a sibling, a friend, a dad, or a partner. I don't know what their favorite things are, or their childhood was like, or what they do between naps. But I'm really, really grateful and excited to learn and share the versions of this man. I believe that more than just the physical traits are passed on. Zeta gave me his adaptability, the self-sufficiency, the inability to ask for help, the lack of necessity to smile in photos. But there's a generosity too. Anytime I was like, Zeta, it's a nice shirt, he'd be like, you want it? And I'm definitely excited to get some sweaters out of this. So thank you, Zeta, for being you and making me and sharing your love with all of us and your sweaters.
Okay, thank you for bearing with us as we share so many memories. Kind, honest, respectful, hardworking, resourceful, caring, patient, generous. These are some of the words we have continued to hear today and the ones that come to most people's minds when they think of our Zeta Chuck. Over the past few weeks, all the grandchildren have been sharing memories about our Zeta, and I want to share a few stories on everyone's behalf that highlight these very special qualities. Zeta was a man of few words, but actions spoke louder than words ever could. He would patiently let us dress him up in ridiculous costumes and comb his hair, play cards, games, and catch, sit through dozens of hours of dance recitals, school musicals, and graduations, and always slipped us loonies and toonies when our parents weren't looking. He made calling his grandchildren a priority, quietly listening on conversations with Baba and eventually piping in to say, "I'm here too." He was so amazing because he always made time for each of us no matter where in the world we were, checking in to see what was new in all of his grandchildren's lives. We all had a special bond with Zeta, and he had an extra special sweet spot for Ronnie. As a kid, their basement on Tandalia was full of treasures, where there was always something new to see or play with, like the big radio, fur coats in the closet, the old phone, the record player, and so much more. Zeta never hesitated to play with us or indulge us in whatever game or shenanigans we came up with. Zeta went above and beyond when it came to his family. He never missed a bar, bat mitzvah, birth, wedding, or any other occasion, traveling to Toronto and Israel frequently. Personally, it meant so much to Adam and I that Zeta was willing to share his 93rd birthday with us for our wedding. His love and commitment to family was clearly instilled in us, as he was a large reason why we chose to get married on that date. It was so important to us that he was there to celebrate. Zeta Chuck was an extremely tech-savvy 95-year-old. He embraced it all, especially Facebook, where he would often comment and post to family and friends, except that one time when he started a live stream, and it wasn't until Carmi noticed, confused yet intrigued, and reached out to the family that he realized all of his friends could see his every move. His computer skills came in handy when the pandemic hit. He would patiently sit there quietly through chaotic, frolic, reason-back Zoom calls. Even though he didn't say much, we all knew he was just happy that we were all connecting. Zeta took so much pride in their house on Dahlia, where we all grew up and had so many amazing memories. Even though Zeta was hesitant to move, I believe he ultimately did it because he cared so much about Baba. He just wanted the best for her and knew she would be taken care of there. His time at the Bolton may have been short, but it was so nice having him close by, and it made us extra happy knowing that he was secretly participating in his favorite exercise class, Fitter Sitters, multiple times per week. I think it's safe to say that all of the grandchildren shared in his love of a good nap. We could always count on Zeta to fall asleep anywhere, like at a 60th birthday party, on a lounge chair, in the middle of a busy cruise ship pool deck, or really anywhere. We would often find our Baba joining him in a nap on the couch after family dinners. Most recently in the hospital, the nurses brought in a recliner for Baba so she could be more comfortable to stay into the night. Like clockwork, around 8 p.m., she fell asleep in the chair right next to him, just like any other evening after family dinners. Zeta also passed along his love of great food and snacking. Anytime we had dinner with them and wanted to send them home with food or Max's delicious chocolate babka, Baba would always say, no, it's okay, and he always said, okay, never passing up a good treat. As he started slowing down more recently, he stayed committed to maintaining his strength, only reluctantly using his walker or cane with a lot of persistence from us. This also included continuing to drive until this very last month. Even when he got really sick with listeria early in the pandemic and nobody could visit him, we never heard him complain once. He would just happily chat with all of us whenever we checked in, just as he always did. We're so lucky to have had such an amazing Zeta for so long. His great niece shared that she always felt there was a love and bond that connected all of Zeta Chuck's siblings that was woven into so much of the family and younger generations. Zeta, we hope you feel that this is the case. We love you and will miss you every day.
I'm just going to share some words from the Israel girls that we wish were with us. From Meital, the oldest of our Israeli cousins. We grew up with only one special Zeta. Despite the distance between us, Zeta, in our hearts, you were always so close. We remember childhood experiences of flying to see you to Canada, being at your house, eating Baba's food, and just hanging out with you, watching TV with you, waiting for you to do the porridge because that was your specialty. Ronnie combs your hair and puts all kinds of towels on you, and you look pretty cool. It is the childhood experiences that we remember the most. In recent years, especially with Corona, it has challenged our distance, yet tradition is tradition. Every Friday we Skype with Baba and Zeta sitting there. Miles separate us, but the conversation is so close. Those who are interested keep up to date and ask about the weather, because Zeta always knows the news. Waiting to hear your comment between Baba's sentences, and it's enough for you to say 2 words, and they penetrate deeply. Just like the saying, still water penetrates deep. The conversations about your family, your laughter, and kind eyes managed to penetrate right into our hearts. Zeta, we will miss you very much. We will tell our sons-in-law and our children what a Zadie we had. We love you a lot. We will continue to talk to you on Fridays because such a great distance did not stop us, nor did you now look at us in the sky. And from Leora, as my uncle mentioned, was fortunate to have been here with us this summer. Zeta, I feel so lucky for the last visit. I didn't think the situation would deteriorate so quickly. I feel that a lot of the communication with you is mainly through looks and less with words, and that you can always see your eyes, which are so understanding, to the point that I felt it through the Skype screen every Friday. There was a moment on our last visit that I will never forget. It was at a Friday night dinner when we sat down, me, you, Ronnie, and Baba, and we had a conversation about politics and the history of the family and agriculture and other topics that children don't talk about, and you were so enthusiastic about the fact that we are already adults and we have our own character. And when I saw it was already 12 at night and I knew that you needed to rest, I said it was fine, and if you went and stood up and you had such a sparkle in your eyes, and I saw that you were waiting for it to be quiet, and you said, "I'm so glad you're here." And I saw how much you were trying to say in that sentence. And I just thought, I'm so happy to be here, Zeta. I'm glad that I got to be your granddaughter, even if it's from afar, and even if we met once in a few years, I'm glad that I was exposed to your challenging and interesting life. Thank you for years of listening, of attention. I love you, and I will miss you so much. I promise to drive this week with both hands on the wheel.
Anyone else?
Those of us in the cemetery are standing, but I'm going to ask anyone online who would like to join us here. You may stand as well for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim Shochein B'Meromim Hametzem Nucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utehorim Kizohar Rakia Mazhirim Ad Nishmat Yeshayahu Ilya ben Aryeh Mordechai v'Malka Shalach le'olama Began Eden Tiyeh Menuchato Ana Bal Rachamim Hastirayu B'seter Knafecha le'olamim Utzeror B'tzeror Chaim et Nishmato Adonai Unachalato Ve'yanuach B'shalom Al Mishkavo V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the good to the soul of Yeshayahu Ilya, the son of Aryeh Mordechai and Malka, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he forever rest in peace. And we can all say, Amen. At this point in the service, before we have the opportunity to say Kaddish, we're going to show our intention to fill the entire grave. I'm sure we'll get mostly there. It's considered the highest act of chesed and chesed shelemet to take part in this act if you can. Rabbi Kliel often explains that you use the back of the shovel. When you're using the back of the shovel, you're showing that you're not shoveling in the usual way. But of course, the point is to actually get the earth into the grave, so do what you need to do. I often just use my hands. We also say that we like to give people the opportunity to perform the act from its beginning to its end. Therefore, picking up the shovel, putting about 3 shovelfuls in, and putting it down. If someone needs help with the shovel, though, of course, please do. The shorter shovel here with this earth in this bucket is easier to use. I'm going to ask the family to come forward first and partake. You can get all the shovels going at the same time from either side of the earth, and then everyone else who'd like to can come forward, and then we'll pause at some point so the family can say Kaddish. Thank you. And at this point, I'll call everyone else forward to come join us in the line if you're able to help us. We'd like to get as much of the grave covered as possible before we start. At least one layer, so if you have good aim.
Well, I'm with Jordan. When I was by you, with you, I'm with Jordan. But you were by yourself. Was that? Yeah. Because I was walking behind. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Every time. I don't even want to talk about it because then I have to go. What are you doing over there, Wino?
Yeah.
How are you? Good. Are you? Where do you put your hand? There's always my knee. Oh, she did. Yeah, you think I could get the floor myself? I can't. I've done the knee takes. Wait, you're the one who's like, yeah, I'm picking my nails. I'm not going to start it. He does do the yeah. I mean, I don't know. I know. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, we did have trouble with that. Yeah, we did have trouble. We had to stop. Good. We had to stop things, but I sort of got to the point where it's just.
Okay, I just don't want to totally lose everybody's attention because I want the family to still be able to say Kaddish. So a few more shovelfuls are going to go in just to make sure we have everything covered. But if I could orient your attention to me over here. Kaddish is something that is never said in any other way other than in community. Community is what makes Kaddish give us the comfort that it does. Something special happens with the Kaddish between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, for sure, is that we say the words la'ela, la'ela, to reach higher and higher. So although we're not necessarily talking about the words specifically, it's my hope that these words help you be elevated further and further, certainly as Chuck would have wanted us all to be as we face Yom Kippur without him here physically. He will always be here with us in every way. I think most of us can feel that already. So do you think we're ready at this point to say Kaddish? You okay? Okay. So I may forget the la'ela, but I'm sure somebody here will make sure that I don't. Yitzgadal v'yitzgadal shemei rabbah, ve'alma divra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen, yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'me'almaya. Yitbarach v'yishabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudusha b'reichu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata v'ushbachata v'nechamata da'amiram be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'yamamav, v'yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. So you're welcome to continue to fill in the grave. The Shiva is private and very abbreviated. If you are one of the people that is going to be attending the very private Shiva, please be masked. It's very important to the family. We finish every service in the cemetery as the mourners are about to make their way into their Shiva period with the words, which if you're not a mourner, you could repeat after me. They go like this: Hamakom Yinachem Etchem B'toch She'ar Evlei Sion V'Yerushalayim which means may you all be comforted, you Chuck's mourners, amongst all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, and we like to add all the nations who are in mourning, and everybody else can say to that, Amen. So I invite you to continue to fill the grave, comfort the mourners, and leave when you wish.